A lot of my work is related to the energy industry. And one of the things that's going on right now is that companies, utilities are trying to control how much energy people use and when they use it. You know, we have periods we call peak periods. That tends to be like when people first come home from work, particularly in the summer. What do? They turn up their air conditioning. So you're putting a lot of demand on the grid, that's the electric grid, and are causing utilities to fire up old generators that use a lot more electricity. So to the extent that we can even out electric usage, we accomplish several things. One, we reduce costs because we're not firing up those old grids. And number two, we reduce the probability of outages, because what tends to happen is if you fire up those old generators, sometimes they don't work as well. And we have what's called rolling blackouts, and all of a sudden you don't have any electricity. So as we think about how do we accomplish this, one of the most important ways is to try and change what we call social norms. Social norms are kind of expected ways for us to behave. We feel guilty if we don't behave that way. I'll give you a good example. When ATM machines were first invented, people would line up, behind the ATM, and they would line up one right after the other. And it felt very uncomfortable for the first person in line, because it felt like somebody was looking over their shoulder as they were punching in that number. And gradually people would complain, and we started moving people back to where now there's a generally accepted distance that you're going to be behind somebody else in terms of creating a social norm. You won't be more than 8 or 10 feet behind them. So that's one way about creating social norms. Another way that I find very fascinating, I'm old enough to remember that when I was in kindergarten and first grade, what was one of our first art projects? We made ashtrays. And that was considered acceptable to smoke. In fact, when people ask us, do you mind if I smoke? You were almost ostracized if you said, yeah, I do mind if you smoke. So what we've seen are real changes in those social norms related to smoking. Those are two behaviors. So now what we're looking at, in fact, I always wonder, to be honest with you, when people are gathered around the outside of the building on those cold winter days and they're sitting there smoking their cigarettes, I'm wondering if they're plotting a revolution or exactly what it is that they're doing. But now one of the things that we're trying to do is change the norms that people have related to the use of electricity. And there are several factors related to that. One is you have to make the change as easy as possible. When programmable VCRs were first introduced, it basically took you about 3 hours to program that VCR, and you probably had to get somebody over and pay them to do it. So eventually they came up with a very simple way to do it. And one of the things that's happening now in the electric industries, we're trying to find very simple ways that people can interface with their electrical system so that they can make that an easier process, so that it's not hard for people to make those changes. The second thing that we're trying to do is to make people understand that those differences, those changes in their own behavior really matter. If they think they're too small, then they won't have any impact. So one of the things that we're trying to help people understand is that, in fact, those are things that really matter to people. And there was a study done in the 1980s where, in fact, one of the things that people did, the utility offered an incentive for people to change their behavior. But all it was a mention in a newspaper article. It was a very small incentive. And because it was a small incentive, once people did it, they couldn't attribute the change to, oh, I'm getting all of this money, or I'm getting all of this good product. I'm really getting something very small. So this must be something I believe in. And in fact, subsequently, they went back to those same people and said, we know we made this offer to you, but here are some circumstances that are changed, and we're not going to be able to make you that offer. And the actual rate of compliance went up because people started defining themselves as, if this very small incentive makes such a difference to me, it must be important to me. So we've actually changed the way in which they've defined themselves and changed it from pressure from the outside, the social norm, to pressure from the inside. I must really believe in this.